The presentation we're hearing tonight is happening in the context of an exhibition that is showing at Heiligenkreuzerhof right now. And I had the pleasure of co-curating it with Stefanie Kitzberger, who sits over there. You probably know her. Yes, and I'll just give you a short introduction, a little bit of context, and then we're going to hear Marta, who's already here. The exhibition Textile Transfers traces two textile collections within the collection of what is now the University of Applied Arts Vienna. Those of Rosalia Rothansel, who was living between 1870 and 1945, and of Mileva Stojsavljevic-Rolla, who lived from 1886 to 1949. As one of the first women in Central Europe to ever receive a professorship, Rothansel taught many modernist artists, such as Friederike Brandeis, Wally Wieseltier, and Elisabeth Kalinski in the field of textile techniques. And Mileva Stojsavljevic-Rolla trained at the Kunstgewerbeschule, was an animal and a graphic artist, and was active early on in the context of the secession. Both textile collections are composed of multicolored, handcrafted, woven, knit, embroidered, and lace clothing, as well as fragments in regionally specific patterns originating from anonymous creators in the rural regions of what was then Austria-Hungary. So Hungary, Bohemia, Moravia, Dalmatia, and so on, but also South and East Asia. These objects were worn in the context of the dress reform movement and used as teaching aids, that means copied and abstracted in the artistic training. Despite being decontextualized, their authors anonymized, the textiles exerted a huge influence on Viennese modernism. This is especially evident in the works of the Wiener Werkstätte, as designs from Rosalia Rothansel's class were sold to it, and many of her students started their careers there. One of these students was Emmy Zweibrück, 1890 to 1956, a graphic and textile artist who had her own studio and private art school in Vienna before she migrated to the US in 1939. I'm showing her laces, the one on the left from the 1925 International Exhibition of Modern Decorative and Industrial Arts in Paris, to build a bridge to today's lecture, which I'm looking forward to very much. It is the second in a row of 3 guest lectures by researchers from Brno, which feels especially kismet since many of the artworks we're showing in the exhibition were produced in Moravia. You can find all dates on our website. So after Julia Zaklena and before Matthew Rampley, we are welcoming Marta Filipová, present here today, to tell us all about her research. And I'll just tell you a little bit about her, and then she'll start. Dr. Marta Filipová is research fellow at the Masaryk University Brno, Czech Republic, where she is the principal investigator of the project Beyond the Village, Folk Cultures as Agents of Modernity, 1918 till 1945. She has been working on the questions of identities in modern art and design and the politics of display. Her latest publication is Czechoslovakia at the World's Fairs, Behind the Facade. She also published Modernity, History and Politics in Czech Art in 2020 and edited the volume Cultures of International Exhibitions 1840 till 1940, Great Exhibitions in the Margins. She is a member of the editorial board of the journal Art East Central. And the stage is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming, and especially thank you for the invitation, which obviously I'm really glad to be talking to you about our project and my research here in the context of this really great looking exhibition, which I'll go and see tomorrow. And maybe tomorrow I'll be kind of thinking, oh, I should have said that and I should have done it differently. So unfortunately, I didn't have the time to go there today. So let's see how this all fits together. So I will today be talking about the Czech and Slovak parts of Czechoslovakia that was formed in 1918, but until that year it was an integral part of Austro-Hungarian monarchy. So it shared a lot of history, a lot of cultural institutions with the rest of the monarchy, and I will be showing how that influenced a lot of what was going on in Czechoslovakia after 1918. So what I'll be focusing on today is lace, particularly, and I'll kind of look at it in the context of folk art, but also how it became used for all sorts of different purposes and claimed by different agents. What's basically my interests are these kind of Czech centers of sort of textile making and folk art mainly in the Bohemian and Moravian regions of what became Czechoslovakia. So I'm not that much today looking at the Slovak regions of the country, even though I will be kind of mentioning them a little bit later in a slightly different context. The Czech and Moravian parts are, for me, more important today because they also inherited most of the industries from earlier Habsburg monarchy, and that made them quite special, basically, because Czechoslovakia could really build on this legacy of quite important industrial heritage as a new state, and it benefited a lot from this kind of industrial legacy. So in the map on the left, I will be showing several little maps which are quite like as sort of quite interesting also contemporary examples of also graphic design, because some of them are from the interwar period. And they are also indicative of how people visualized the situation. So they also kind of say something else than just mapping things. So the one on the left is from this school book from 1932, which presented children with lots of kind of facts and information, also put on the map of Czechoslovakia. So in this map, it focuses on coal mines and textile industries, and so the textile industries are the red parts. So you can kind of see where they were mostly concentrated across the Bohemian part on the left and the Moravian part, which is the kind of belt that goes across. We can compare it to the map on the other side, which is now contemporary, and which shows where the main lace-making schools were situated, and it in a way parallels the map of the textile industries. So the schools where lace-making was happening were in the main centers, and what's quite kind of typical of this is that these red areas are the mountainous areas, and so textiles and lace making was mainly concentrated where the mountains are. And it's got a logic, because lace making was really a winter craft. So when there was no work outside, so women, usually women, would be concentrating on producing lace, embroidering, and so on. So this is just to give you a sense of where things were happening. This research I'm presenting now is part of my project that was mentioned already, and that is looking at mainly the interwar period in the Czechoslovak context, and where we're trying to sort of contest the usual narrative about the interwar period as being sort of highly modernized, industrialized time where the avant-garde was ruling the visual arts, and we're trying to kind of look at the ongoing interest in folk art and folk culture in the Czechoslovak context, which was on the one hand despised by the kind of mainstream modernists as something obsolete, something kind of that needs to be put in the museums and just not paid attention. So we're trying to kind of show that there was a very rich, ongoing kind of folk art production in this period, which was actively, all these kind of artists were also actively responding to the times of modernism, to the modern era. They were not some sort of just obsolete crafts people, but they were actively kind of interacting with the modern period. And hopefully I'll be showing you some examples of that today. So here's another map I quite like, and it's from another school book which presents the main industries and crafts in Czechoslovakia in the period, in the interwar period. So it shows quite nicely where things were made, what kind of main kind of crafts or applied arts were made in different regions. But it can be contrasted with this kind of official attempt of Czechoslovakia, mainly through its institutions and through its government, to be seen as really something, some very modern country which is turned to the future. It tries to kind of be just on par with other European developed countries. And this was really important for, well, not only for the government, but for businesses, to show that it's got a very strong modern identity, because it was a brand new country. In 1918, it was created as a very brand new entity. So until then, it didn't exist, nobody knew about it, so suddenly there's this new country, and it needs to kind of develop its own distinctive identity and symbolism. That became very prominent, this kind of identity and symbolism, in the Czechoslovak presence in World's Fairs of the interwar period, where out of all the new countries in Central Europe that came out of the Habsburg monarchy, Czechoslovakia was really the most eager and most sort of active in taking part in every single big exhibition, big World's Fair, to mainly find new markets, but also to really show others what it stood for, so what it was all about. You can see some of the examples of the pavilions here that were built by Czechoslovakia in these different exhibitions, in the biggest ones. And they share most of them this kind of strong emphasis on functionalist architecture, probably apart from Rio de Janeiro, which was the very first example of pavilion architecture. This kind of decorative style was quickly abandoned because it was seen as something kind of, not really fit for the new state. But from then on, really the strong emphasis was on functionalist international architecture of these pavilions. Compared to, for instance, Austria, that took part in only 5 of these exhibitions, and those are those highlighted in grey. Czechoslovakia took part in more than 20. So a really huge effort, financial commitment, but also obviously something that paid off. The world learned about Czechoslovakia from these affairs. When you looked inside the pavilions, they usually shared very similar kind of set of exhibits, again really speaking of modernity, of orientation towards kind of industries, inventions, showing the latest machinery, and it was also seen in these kind of lavish expositions of glass, for instance, which were present in all the pavilions, all these kind of different inventions and photographs of machinery, like on the in the picture on the bottom left, and in the presentations of sort of these giant companies that also were trying to make it big on the market, like the Baťa shoe company, which really used the Czechoslovak pavilions to promote itself as well on the national or international markets. But at the same time, a very big emphasis was also placed on showing Czechoslovakia as a country with a specific, distinctive history and culture. And it was here that folk art became really important as well. And it became a very present kind of phenomenon that was just included in all these different pavilions and in the kind of context of their modernity. So in each of them you had women, it was always women, and folk dresses that would kind of add the kind of exoticized feel of something kind of distinctive and different for the kind of universal modernism. So there was this kind of flair of distinctiveness. I have to say that Czechoslovakia was not that original in this effort, because these kind of efforts or attempts to show countries as embedded in folk traditions were really common for many other countries like Germany, Italy, Ukraine, and so folk dress was something that was habitually included to kind of present somebody's imaginary kind of otherness, if you want. The 1925 Parisian exhibition is a very kind of good example of how all these things come together as well in one place, where it was obviously an exhibition that was turned towards modern design, craft. It was trying to find some new visual language that would be also commercially successful. And Czechoslovakia also used this exhibition for that purpose. And in its kind of modernist pavilion, it tried to present its crafts and applied arts as something that is also very distinctive for the country. So. What was included was tapestries, furniture, glass, pottery, interior design, always shown as highly skilled and in the kind of crafts of the making of these objects. And what was also included, and very successfully so here, was lace and lace making. Now, this was not the very first time, but where the lace-making artist Emilie Paličková Mildeová appeared, but it was her first real success, where she was presented through several pieces of lace, which were highly praised by the organizers of the exhibition and won Czechoslovakia several awards and obviously fame to the artist. This is the work that was awarded Grand Prix called The Sun, which was a really big lace of 1.5 meters in diameter, which is a substantial piece. Paličková is quite an interesting artist who was born in Bohemia in 1892. She then spent some time in Bulgaria with her family, and where she studied sort of applied arts school. They then moved back to Bohemia just before the First World War, and she studied at the Arts and Crafts School in Prague, where she kind of became interested in textiles. And after the First World War, she became employed first at the Arts and Crafts School, but then at a newly founded institute for sort of home industries that I will talk about in a minute. This exhibition in 1925 really started off her career and her kind of success. Because in general, lace in this exhibition, and we heard about that earlier from Eva, it kind of included a lot of lace from not only Czechoslovakia, but from Vienna, Austria, and other places in Central Europe. And there's this important publication by Marie Dormoy, who published her kind of exciting record of lace in Central Europe after this exhibition, published in 1926, where she really focused on Central Europe as this kind of new center of lace making after the kind of traditional centers of France, Belgium, Germany, and Great Britain lost their kind of importance. So the kind of the center moved to Central Europe. So she talks about the Viennese lace making, and which also, I'm sure some of you have seen the exhibition of Dagobert Peche at the MAC recently, where it also showed the lace of his and his colleagues. So Dormoy talks about them as well as important kind of lace makers, and sort of talks about Vienna as being the refined, having the refined spirit for this kind of works, and she finds some sort of light humor in these laces, and attempt to capture fantasy worlds, and in sort of some kind of attempt to define some new Austrian contemporary design. Even though she talks a lot about Austria, it's really Czechoslovakia that Dormoy pays most attention to, and she spends most time basically, and most of the illustrations are of works from Czechoslovakia. And she kind of makes this interesting comment that in Bohemia, she kind of thinks that lace becomes really important and thriving because women basically have enough time to spend long hours lace making. It's obviously not taking into account all sorts of realities that lace makers had to go through, which I will talk about later. But she kind of gives it this sort of slightly imaginary and exotic feel that women in Bohemia have this kind of almost pastime interest in lace making, and dismissing the kind of social and economic reality of their trade. What's also interesting in this context is that she, and this is Dormoy, she doesn't really distinguish between the lace makers, who are these women that spend hours making the lace, and the artists that actually then appear as the named creators of the lace. So she includes Paličková Milde here, many other sort of Czech artists as the kind of true authors of these quite exquisite works, and she puts them next to lace which is made anonymously, that doesn't have any big names attributed to them. So it also becomes a little bit problematic from this point of view, how she kind of lumps all these works together. The fact that she also puts Central European lace altogether makes it for or creates interesting juxtapositions and comparisons. So you can kind of draw various parallels between the Bohemian lace and those examples of the from the Viennese workshops, and it kind of invites a question whether or to what extent they were aware of each other's work. With Paličková Milde, I'm not so sure whether or to what extent she really knew the work of, for instance, Peche. But what is for certain is that they came out from the same kind of legacy of the same schooling system, the same institutions that were promoting lace, the same. They would be using the same pattern books to learn various lace making patterns. So the actual base they shared. They also often appeared in the same exhibitions, so it's also possible that obviously they knew quite well of each other's work. And they obviously looked at the same magazines and so on. So as regards the kind of shared history in the Habsburg Empire of the of lace making, it kind of dates back to the late 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, where first lace making schools were established. Not only in Prague but also in Vienna, and were really promoted officially by the government, and all these kind of different schools that would be set up across the empire, they would really be using similar or the same pattern books, and teachers would sort of move from different schools to train other teachers. So really they shared a lot of in common. In Bohemia and obviously in other parts of the empire, lace making was supported officially by authorities for many reasons, but obviously it was one of the big ones was to give a source of income to women in the poorer regions, hence the mountains of Bohemia and the kind of winter crafts. But when Czechoslovakia was formed, obviously these institutions had to be split up and in a way decentralized, and they were kind of attached to the different new states. So in Czechoslovakia, Czechoslovakia inherited some 33 schools of lace making from the Habsburg Empire, which all went again under the governmental State Department of Education that kept overseeing the trade and the kind of the schooling and the lace making in these institutions. In 1919, the Prague State Institute of Education for the Domestic Industry was founded, and this was really the main institution from which lace lace designs originated. So this is where Paličková then started working, and where she started making her designs, which were then sent off to the different lace making courses and in the various regional schools. The center is in Prague, but where the design work is taking place, but the actual lace making is taking place in these various schools in the regions. After 1918, there were some 2,000 students across the whole country learning lace, so that was quite a lot of them, and around 20,000 lace makers who actually made living making lace. And here we really have a combination of traditional technique, which was taken off from the folk art heritage, together with the skill of the lace making women, and some sort of trained artist who is situated in the capital, and she kind of starts turning lace into a self-sufficient artistic medium. And so I'll be showing a little bit of work of Paličková Milde to kind of give you an an overview of her interwar works in the next few slides. So you can kind of see where she developed lace and how she really turned it into a self-sufficient, really artistic medium. So in these examples of the life in the countryside, you can tell that it's a centrical composition which plays with this kind of sense of depth and landscape, which kind of goes towards the center. She is gradually abstracting the figures in the lace as well, towards more and more abstraction, which is quite evocative. And she uses also quite efficiently shading, which is done all through the kind of needlework of the lace. In this example, this is life of a woman. She presents 4 different kind of stages of a woman's life in 4 different parts of the lace, which now is a square. And again, she kind of plays around with perspective, with abstraction, and but also she kind of already tries to disrupt the border of the lace, which is no longer a solid border, but she kind of disrupts it a bit by these kind of outgoing little circles and shapes which step out, as it were, from the frame of the lace. And this is something that she then became quite famous for, these kind of laces that kind of just don't respect the one kind of concise form of the traditional, I don't know, square or circle. But again, I guess what is important to say again is that she would be designing these great pieces, but it would be students in the various schools that are actually making them and turning them into the actual work. Paličková Milde apparently knew how to make lace, but she wouldn't make it herself. So she had a lot of, obviously, support in this regard. And to an extent that for the lace that was submitted to the Parisian exhibition in 1925. It apparently took some 11,000 hours to actually make that lace. So obviously there was a lot of work involved in this. Now, so these are some other examples of her work where she already is also trying to experiment with asymmetry and asymmetrical compositions, which disrupts again the kind of traditional form of lace. And as I said, she was really successful with her work to an extent that in Sweden, her work was called the most beautiful lace in the world. And I don't know exactly which one it was, but this photograph here is from the exhibition, and I assume it's one of those 2 framed pictures on the wall, which present Paličková's lace as a wall, as a framed, basically wall artistic work. Now, this is quite common how her work was presented, not as some sort of utility piece of lace, but as a real kind of piece of art which you could hang on the wall behind a piece of glass. And one last example of her work is this lace, which I really like. It's from 1939, and it was made for the New York exhibition, the World's Fair in New York. And it really kind of takes lace making to another level with this kind of two streams of a procession and then a stream of buildings, which again play with perspective, with the kind of flow of movement, the shading, the abstraction, and so on. So in her work, what we get is quite an interesting merger of understanding the folk technique of lace making, which then turns to some kind of cottage home industry, and some artistic involvement that brings it to the next level. And this merger was quite kind of common for how lace was framed in Czechoslovakia, not only in exhibitions, but also, for instance, in terms of marketing and sales. So lace appears in different publications as anonymous, next to pictures of Paličková's work, which again kind of without making much distinction what comes from where and what's the artistic lace, what's the kind of anonymous lace. And there's quite a few companies and corps that start really looking after lace and commissioning lace making as a really important commercial product. And so one of these corps, which did exactly that, was Dětva, which has an advert in this catalogue. And Dětva was a very interesting example of a company that was founded in Bratislava, today's Slovakia, and in 1919. But it came out of a Hungarian predecessor called Isabella. So a company that previously was of Hungarian ownership and administration. And they employed artists who would design various products, and these designs were then sent out to different villages and workshops for the actual making of them. So Dětva was very kind of then successful in selling all of these kind of products within Czechoslovakia and as well as abroad. And but as I will kind of say a bit later, this kind of Hungarian origin of the company is quite important as well. Now, there are many examples of various exhibitions where lace was presented and sold nationally within Czechoslovakia and internationally. At the bottom here, there's a big exhibition from Brno in 1928 where Paličková's work again appears behind glass as a sort of artistic artifact. And again, it was all mixed up with sales of small pieces of lace in this kind of context of the exhibition. Lace becomes a very successful commodity nationally and internationally, and there are many shops abroad as well, in the United States, for instance, that really specialize in selling lace as something kind of quite exotic and and distinctive. The example on the left bottom is from a shop in Prague, which specialized in basically design products, and it was full of very kind of functionalist design of porcelain, glass, furniture, but it was also softened by the feminine textiles. For instance, the various kind of, not only lace, but various cushions and embroidered pieces of textiles. So in this context, the lace really played the kind of very gendered feminine addition to the functionalist masculine design. Some of these examples might look familiar to you because they are very kind of universal in the way how lace was applied into fashion, and not only lace but also embroidery, and how it became really popular during the interwar period. And Czechoslovakia was really marketing itself through fashion like this as something kind of quite distinctive. And what nevertheless needs to be also mentioned is that this kind of interest in applying lace and embroidery onto fashion has very kind of strong nationalist connotations in the Czech context, but it's no exception. I mean, it was obviously happening in many other parts of Central Europe. I can speak of the Czech context, where from the, let's say, mid-19th century, fashion with ornaments derived from folk art became a real kind of symbol of sort of folk heritage, folk fashion, and became really adopted by nationalists in their kind of nationalist revival. And that interest kind of carried on until into the First World War and the interwar period. It sometimes was criticized, but it nevertheless prevailed until, let's say, the Second World War. What nevertheless is not visible in this kind of these kind of examples is that folk ornament and folk art, which is then adopted into sort of high fashion or the visual arts, is already losing, obviously, its original purpose. And what I mean by that is that the very original kind of idea for creating folk art was to serve the immediate community, the immediate, family, village, and so on. Through examples like this, folk art, folk ornament already kind of steps out of that original environment and is made for a very different class. So it's no longer the peasants, the working class, but it's now made for the middle classes, for the urban kind of elites, for the bourgeoisie. And it kind of distorts the kind of original conditions, and the conditions that many of the real lace makers had to kind of live through while making all these kind of exquisite laces or embroideries for the customers and for the let's say for these big artists. So part of my interest is also looking at the conditions of these women that were actually making the lace and what they had to kind of live through. So through various shortages of not only material in the First World War, but also shortages of, for instance, coal, food. I've seen letters of schools asking for subsidies for heating, for food for the pupils, and so really quite difficult conditions, and including after the First World War. They had to cope with new tariffs, and in current climate, we don't need to explain what tariffs are because we all know from other references. But after the First World War, really tariffs were a huge problem for any export, any kind of works that these women really relied on. And so one of the questions I'm kind of asking is who really can claim to be the originator of the lace that we see presented in the exhibitions or sold in the various shops or being applied to dresses. And so one part of it is the anonymity of the creators, but the other part is also the ethnic origin of these usually women. And so, as I mentioned, in the Czech environment, in the Czech context, there was a really strong emphasis on presenting lace as something specifically Czech or even, or Slavic, in order to make it not German or not Hungarian. So there were real efforts to present it as something specifically Bohemian, Moravian, Slovakian. And but it kind of gets really complicated when you look again at the maps that I had shown before, where we kind of get reminded of where the main centers of textile industries were and lace making. And when we compare it to the ethnic map of Czechoslovakia, and so the blue areas are where are the borderlands, obviously, where there was the majority of German speakers. So for a long time, many of the schools, many of the women were of German ethnic origin, and that aspect is often kind of being quite suppressed in favor of the kind of Czechoslovak identity of the lace, which gets kind of put on it as a label. There were other kind of disputes over lace, which I'm not going to go through now because I'm running out of time, to do with, for instance, Hungarian origins, but also towards the Second World War, we see a lot of kind of almost racist undertones that are kind of coming up in terms of claiming folk art, lace, folk dress as belonging to a specific ethnicity. And I just included this one quite atrocious quotation, which took real offense of Jewish women dressing up in sort of Moravian folk costumes in 1940. So to start concluding, so the questions that I ask myself mainly of who can claim folk art within the kind of territory of Czechoslovakia and lace in particular has kind of several avenues and answers. So when we look at lace as some sort of very popular commercial article for export, it can be claimed by the state, by various companies, co-ops, for its commercial value, and it becomes a very successful commodity. But lace can be also claimed by specific ethnic groups for the purposes of their identity, and so it becomes an identifier of specific nationality, whether it's Czech, Czechoslovak, or not German, or not Hungarian. It also can become an important kind of item of fashion and design, and then it becomes claimed by the middle classes, so by a different class from where it was originally meant, and it becomes claimed by artists like Paličková Milde as well, who kind of makes her name out of this craft quite well. And obviously there's a very strong gendered element which is included in this, and the question who can claim lace is usually related to women and women's work, whether it's anonymous or whether it's kind of artistic. So these are some of the kind of fine lines of what lace can represent, and lines that are often blurred, but that can also hopefully reveal to us some of these kind of nuances about what folk art becomes in the interwar period, and how it kind of becomes adopted for all of these different purposes and intentions. And I'll finish on that, and I hope you've got some interesting questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This was really fascinating. Thank you, Marta. We saw so many cross-references and similarities that are super interesting, but we can talk after, I guess. So are there any questions?
I was wondering, like, it must, as you said, it took a huge amount of time and also woman craft. Who paid for this? Like, how was that financed? And I was also wondering, looking at those imagery, which is really fascinating, I just was wondering if there's any film documents that would show those people working from that time or later on.
Okay, thank you. So who paid for it? These kind of vast works were commissioned usually by the state, and they were already kind of made for representative purposes. So they would be financed through the School for Domestic Arts in Prague, and yeah, obviously also these different schools were themselves active in trying to find their own markets and sell the work of the pupils. So they tried to be self-sufficient, but especially during the First World War and immediately after, they had to rely on subsidies as well from the state. In terms of footage, I haven't seen any. It would be great to find some examples. Usually, I guess what I find is that the photographs, and obviously it's a common pattern, they are staged usually. So there's a photographer who comes in, asks the people to sit down and pretend they're lace making. He's not really there for.
My mother is from Slovenia, and she taught me to do that when I was small. And all the old women in Slovenia, they were making like that. They were sitting like that. But I wonder, how can they make such thin laces? How is that the technique? Because with this round polster, I don't know how to say it in English. How do you get such thin laces? It's wonderful.
It's derived from the technique. So it's point needle lace. So it's not bobbin. So bobbin lace uses a thicker thread. The point needle is really sewn, and I can't explain the technique, but it uses much thinner thread. So
Thank you very much. That was great, Marta. I wanted to ask about the agency of the women producing this lace and whether, for example, they had any say in how it was exhibited, and if that kind of changed how it looked.
My guess would be no. They didn't have any say in that because they basically made the product, they sent it off, and they didn't really know what was happening with it. Sorry.
So it wasn't like they were kind of aware of how they weren't kind of professionalizing themselves to kind of be seen in this kind of, exhibited in a big exhibition on a wall. There wasn't kind of an end agenda. It was kind of. Yeah.
I think there are examples of sort of school masters going to see the exhibitions, and these were predominantly male schoolmasters, and then just kind of overseeing the installation maybe, but the actual women who made the lace, they were just the makers. And because often there were pupils through, and there were basically students. The agency there is very kind of limited. So they were basically schooled. So tasked with this.
Thank you also for the super interesting talk that sparked many connections also to my own research. And I was wondering if you know of any transnational comparisons or even instances where they were put together with Italian lace makers, because in southern Italy, lace making was very important and was similarly fostered after the foundation of the Italian nation state in 1861, and then co-opted by the fascists in their attempt to nationalize fashion and regional costumes.
I would imagine that they would be encountered at the exhibitions, at the kind of World's Fairs, maybe not kind of side by side, but in the different pavilions. There were sort of smaller exhibitions, especially in Germany, for instance, where I would imagine that, I don't really know a specific example of Italian lace that would
I feel from my knowledge that the Italian case, it was much more relegated to the folk realm, and because this is really remarkable, the design elements and the artistic agency of these lace artists seems quite unique.
It would be interesting to find out a bit more the kind of geographical spread, because I really would think that in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, there was a shared kind of legacy, and because the schools were set up at a similar time, so it will be interesting to see how far it goes down south, where it, this kind of
So there's one lace making tradition in Burano, so in Venice, and it's a specific protected even way of making lace. And then there's a completely different technique and aesthetic, and that's in the south of Italy. So it's Calabria, and then also in Sicily. So that's somehow distinct, perhaps, from that Austro-Hungarian.
I guess. I mean, you have many other examples of lace making in other parts of the world as well. Obviously, the origins are from Belgium, but it gets kind of transformed regionally in many parts of the world. Finland, there was a really interesting exhibition I've seen recently of Roma lace in Finland. And then it gets transferred to even amongst Native American communities where women are taught lace making in a similar way to give them some source of income, but also give them something to do. It's a very transnational affair.
I have a question, and thanks again also for the wonderful lecture. I have a question going back also to what you asked about agency. I was wondering, because of course it was very obvious that these laces by Paličková were presented as if they were autonomous objects, like abstract art, so to say, and defunctionalized from their original domestic sphere. And also defunctionalized from their sphere of folk art. And then the question was for me, what is the relation between this kind of representation to the economic valorization that comes out of the World Fairs exhibition space, where in front of the exhibition space, or maybe at the cafes, you have a representation of women being in folky dresses, and then you have lace, which is on the level of its production, adopts folk traditions, but maybe more in the production and technique, and then you have its reversal in a modernization as being equalized to other products of modern art. So I wondered if you could talk a lot about this connection or tension a little bit more.
It's a big kind of subject, let's say, and I really find it fascinating how, and you picked up on it really well, that this kind of seeming contrast in between the modernity and the kind of functionalism, and still the ability to kind of somehow find space for the crafts, for the folk techniques, and but I think this is what's really fascinating about the interwar period, where you have these different directions, but they, in a way, are all trying to kind of aim at the same goal, in a way. And it's most obvious for me in the exhibitions, for instance, but also in the various kind of shops and co-ops, which are trying to really combine the progressive modernity with some modernity which is traditional in a way, and this is to kind of show that the state in terms of let's say the official exhibitions, that it's both modern but it's also traditional, and it's got its heritage that means that it goes back hundreds of years. I mean, whether it's an invented story or not, it doesn't matter. But yeah, these kind of craft objects, alleged sort of traditional techniques, they signify that the nation, the state, the group is it's ancient. It goes back hundreds of years. At the same time, it's also modern. It's future-looking. It's progressive, and so it's got all these features that make it distinctive, let's say, and special.
Sorry, maybe I was not so clear because I was like then talking about this. It's great. Thanks for this.
But that wasn't the question.
But the question was also I was talking about this like because the art market is another market than like the market for arts and crafts, and the professionalization of a specific artist as being producing autonomous art, even though like it was produced by somebody else, as we heard, would make a possibility for Paličková to establish herself in a specific realm, and the valorization would change. That's my question. And is it this her intent, or was this a decision by the exhibition makers, so that the representational level is much more important? Like you said, it's a legitimization of like Czechoslovakia being a modern state with a long tradition, and that's thereby like being a real state, so to say. So like the economical realm was like the in terms of these layers of devalorization or valorization, where representation comes into play. Maybe this was too complicated formulated, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure I've got an answer for that, because it would be interesting to. I mean, there's not much. I haven't seen much of Paličková's own kind of reflections on this, and there is an archive of her, but even the archivist stroke her kind of relative said that she didn't herself kind of leave any kind of notes or thoughts. So I wouldn't like to kind of guess what her kind of view was.
So my question is about the uniqueness of the designs. Were they intended to be produced only once, or were they intended to be produced multiple times? Are there any notes on the paper designs you've shown and the life of these forest scenes of the woman? And that links to this question: is it unique, as in a unique artwork, or is it something that is intended or has the possibility to be produced multiple times over? Still could be an addition as an artwork then, but so how are these boundaries defined in what you found in the archives?
The really large pieces which were commissioned, they would be unique. I guess also because of the number of hours really that had to go into them. There were many smaller pieces that were reproduced and also used for training as well. And I know that the school in Prague, where the institute used to be, it still has the original designs, and they occasionally try to make some of it, but some of them are so big that really, I mean, they don't have the time and energy to put into them. But they told me that they are actually, the designs on paper are pretty accurate. What I would really like to know, and that was one of my kind of questions I was trying to find out, was, and it comes back to the question of agency, is the kind of the level of difference or transfer between the design and the actual work. So how much of the actual input the women made into it? Because anybody who's ever made anything out of a sort of paper design knows that you always have to make compromises. You have to make changes. And so, yeah, that would be really great to find out, but I haven't been able to yet establish that. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thanks also for your talk. It was really interesting. I was just wondering, how could anyone of these designers, or how could they really know if they get the quality they imagined for their designs? Because you told us that they were all students, they were learners actually, so how can they really know what's coming out of their design? Because as I know from like my work as a designer, I know you have this really specific picture in your mind and it needs to be like that. But other people are making it for you. So yeah, do you know anything about it?
Well, it's a good question. I always imagine it as a sort of pyramid, the kind of way it was organized. So you've got the artist, and then you've got different kind of levels of teachers or supervisors, and then you have the actual pupils or students who make it, and they're always supervised by someone. So they would be the quality assurance, let's say, or but yeah, I mean, it comes back to the question of how different are the actual works from the design, and to what extent you can allow for some change or some sort of practical difference. So but I mean, when I looked at some of the paper designs compared to the photographs of the lace, they are very, very accurate. And so I guess it also comes back to the fact that Paličková herself knew how to make lace, so she could imagine the actual process. And
thank you very much. My question is more about, or whether you have knowledge also about the present situation, whether there are attempts to revive the art, or yes.
There is still a school, the same school where Paličková used to work. So they have a little lace department, and and lace making really is still kind of, obviously a very niche subject, but it's kind of kept alive, at least in this one institution. So, but in terms of sort of very artistic lace. So,
Thank you so much. I think we're closing at that. Yeah. Have a good night.